Everybody, and thank you so much for joining us all. I'm Jane Kamain from Nine Arches Press, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting this wonderful launch tonight for Kostya Tsolakis and Olga Dermott-Bond with our very special guest, Romalyn Ante. Everyone's just joining us here on the video screen, so I'm delighted to welcome all three of our poets this evening. And hello to everybody who's watching us on YouTube. It's really lovely to see your messages, so please do use the chat on YouTube as well, because it's always lovely to know that our readers are there and gathering around our kind of digital campfire for some wonderful poetry this evening. Two poets are launching their debut collection, and we're absolutely thrilled as well to have a very special guest with us this evening. How this evening will work is that we're going to have readings from each poet, starting with Romalyn Ante, then Olga Dermott-Bond and Kostya Tsolakis. There are subtitles on this event as well, and there's also a link shared, so if you want to be able to see the text of the poems, please do have a look for the link in the chat. And we'll also be posting links through to each of the books as we go through this evening. So please do chat. It's lovely to see where people are calling from. We've got people calling from Northamptonshire. We've got one of Olga's bat spotters joining us from Oxford. Congratulations from London and Hampshire, from Sussex, Berlin and Norwich. So thank you to everybody who's posting messages. It's really, really lovely to see all of you here, and we're so delighted to have your company this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our wonderful special guest and first reader this evening. Romalyn Ante is a Filipino-British poet, essayist and editor. She was born and bred in Batangas, Philippines, and migrated to her second home, Wolverhampton, at the age of 16. She's co-founding editor of Harana Poetry, a magazine for poets who write in English as a second or parallel language, and the founder of Czar with Roma, an online interview series with poets and other creatives. Her debut collection is Antiemetic for Homesickness from Chatto and Windus. She was awarded the Jerwood Compton Poetry Fellowship and was recently elected as a board member of Poetry London and as a Royal Society of Literature Fellow. Will you please give a very warm welcome to our first guest this evening, Romalyn Ante.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And hello, everyone. Good evening or good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're calling from. It's so nice to see Nine Arches Press team here. And I'm so happy that I'm here to support Kostya Tsolakis and Olga Dermott-Bond. These two poets are poets with great power, and their poems are really beautiful and resonant. So I urge you to listen to them tonight and buy their books after if you haven't got them. Okay, so I'm going to read three poems tonight. The first poem that I'm going to read is called Mastering English, and it's from my debut collection, Antiemetic for Homesickness. This poem is written in a form of a questionnaire because when I was applying to be a British citizen, I had to take the Life in the UK exam, and they have some choices, question and multiple choices there. And I thought I should use that form to write this poem, a poem that explore what does it mean to interrogate language, but also to interrogate the lives of migrants, especially migrant nurses here in the UK. Mastering English. In the UK, when they say the sky is not working, they mean God is too high to hear your prayers, or the television channel. The phrase a drop in the ocean indicates very little amount in comparison to what is expected or needed, or all the migrants who mysteriously vanished at sea. An arm and a leg is the constellation Marara, deity of rain clouds, seen from the porch where your colleague housemate used to sit with her younger brother. Or what she says as she turns off her heater. What does I'm just popping out mean. A man rattling a bolted door, adamant to fetch his daughter from school, even if his daughter has already had daughters of her own. Or your lie when you left your child to work in another country. If the charge nurse declares it's neither here nor there, you must understand it as something unimportant or irrelevant, or an opportunity to ask, where is it then? A lot of the poems in Antiemetic for Homesickness explores the theme of migration and nursing and the relationship between a child left behind by the mother nurse. A lot of it are inspired from my own story of having a migrant mother nurse who came here in the UK, and then we migrated here, and eventually I became a nurse myself. But the next poem that I'm going to read is still in the book Antiemetic for Homesickness, tackles something different from the migrant life or from the nursing life. This next poem is called Eponym, and I guess I put it in the book because it is my attempt to navigate what does it mean to be remembered by remembered not because we are remembered for who we are, but remembered because society chose to remember us. And I think that mirrors a lot of when it comes to lives of nurses. When do we remember them and when do we forget them? This poem is called Eponym, and just a little information: the Pearl of Lao Tzu, which was found in the Philippines, was once considered to be the largest known pearl, and then something else beat it. It's still a pearl, it's still found in the Philippines, but I forgot what it's called. But let's just pretend the Pearl of Lao Tzu is still the biggest pearl. Eponym. Legend says a disciple slipped a clam into a jade amulet, and it persisted to grow. The Pearl of Lao Tzu. Its luster spilled over the valley and peeled the sky with the peal of Yutzing bells. Perhaps the pendant was flung in a fit of fury from a delayed enlightenment, or as a gift to calm the great oceans of Hebel. Millennia later, an American called Cobb saved a Datu's child. He was rewarded with a pearl as heavy as an infant. Resembling the shape of a prophet's turban, it was then renamed the Pearl of Allah. I'd like this poem to take you somewhere else, but all I've got is the song of my grandfather, about a fisherman's son whose arm shone in the bloated glow of the goddess of the moon. Tides divide at his call. He swam down to a cathedral of corals. Sometime, somewhere, there was a diver who hoisted the pearl of whoever. He sat at a table with his wife, or maybe on his own, shoulders studded with brine. Sometime, somewhere, there was a fisherman's son who found the world's largest pearl, and we'll never know his name. Again, thank you so much, Jane, Nine Arches Press, for inviting me here. And I cannot wait to hear your poems, Olga and Kostya. It's going to be a good night. The last poem that I'm going to read is a new poem. It's called Fireflower. And I have just finished um, my second, hopefully, my second collection in the future, hopefully. Um, and I guess that collection tackles a lot of different things, but one of the things that it tackles is my attempt to conceive at the time when I was writing it. my husband and I really wanted a child. What does motherhood mean to me at that time? While mothering vulnerable children and young people as a specialist nurse and CBT therapist in the NHS. So, Fireflower is actually a newly found orchid that the scientists found like about 3 years ago in Benguet in the Philippines, and it's a very small flower. It only grows up to 5 centimeter, and I and at the moment it's also kind of like in danger because of climate crisis. But I use that symbol fireflower to explore what it means to want to have a child, and what it means to what kind of feelings can you know do I have when I finally learned that I was pregnant. So good night again, and thank you for coming. Fireflower, a stark yellow speck in a civilization of moss at my feet. You have grown amongst feldspar and graphite, a jasper glint of stem, 5 millimeters of amber buds. How can I take care of you? I think of my husband, whose irises I now realize are not obsidian, but kobicha brown. Love takes endurance. We have tried and tried again. Now, this fire flower rises to 1/5 of a thumb. You do not even know I am here. This flame gold splinter radiates at my feet. I am scared. You are so dainty, so scarce. I am here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Romalyn, for such a beautiful reading, for starting this event this evening for us, and for reading new poems as well. It's wonderful to hear that a second collection is on the way. That will be eagerly anticipated, I'm sure. And what a joy to hear new work from you, as well as some of the poems that we're a little more familiar with, from Antiemetic to Homesickness. Thank you so much. What a joy. Our next reader this evening is Olga Dermott-Bond. Olga has just published her debut, Frieze with 9 Arches, and we're absolutely thrilled to have this new book joining us. And tonight, Olga will be reading in celebration of this new wonderful collection. First of all, to tell you a little bit more about Olga as well. Olga has had poetry and flash fiction published in a wide range of magazines and has won the BBC Proms, Welsh Pool and Shelley 200 poetry competitions. Her 2 poetry pamphlets are Apple Fallen from Against the Grain Press and A Sky Full of Strange Specimens from 9 Pens Press. Originally from Northern Ireland, she lives in Warwickshire, where she works as a secondary school teacher. And Olga is also currently guest editor of the Irish journal Dodging the Rain. Frieze by Olga Dermott-Bond is a really astonishing and spellbinding debut poetry collection. It's one where goddesses, saints, dead girls, creatures, mothers and muses of all forms gather and confide their secret histories and desires. Voices are recovered from canvas and from behind museum glass, from behind the pages of literature and the tales of Irish folklore, to explore what can be recaptured and what remains still out of reach. And what drew me first to Olga's poems is her brilliant, pin-sharp attention to the very fabric of things, both of this world and otherworldly, whether that's the broken umbrella of a bat, the spacesuit worn by Helen Sharman suddenly empty and imagining its own crush of silk and pins and needles. All this alongside her thrilling embrace of the Gothic, the dark-edged wit and the haunted detail. Her poems are at once delectable for all their embrace of this spectral world, but also remain illuminating, present, and packed full of perfect images. Ian McMillan says of this collection, I urge you to immerse yourself in this book. Take your time over each hard-won word and gleaming page. Will you please welcome our next reader this evening, Olga Dermott-Bond.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you so much to Romalyn. Such a treat to hear you read. Thank you for everyone for coming as well. So I'm going to dive in and I'm going to be reading a small selection of poems from my new collection, Frieze. And I'm going to start with a poem that's early on in the collection. And one of the themes that is woven through this collection is, I think, the relationship between life and death. And I think this is well exemplified in a little poem called Mouse. I was really pleased that Jane liked and said could be in the collection. And it was inspired by a visit to the Science Museum, where there is a tiny little taxidermied mouse on display. And I don't want you to think that I'm obsessed with taxidermied creatures, because the front cover is also a dead bird. So this is my poem, Mouse. An almond shelled and cleaned, thumb perfect. Twitching is not a possibility. Pinned down beneath surprisingly pink feet, it can't ever turn to see the albino peacock struck beside it. Hot throb of fine grease when I place my hand against the glass. Beneath, fur soft, skin soft, its inside taken out, ribs arranged like a toast rack in a Victorian's doll's house. I want and don't want to pick it up, roll it over to see stitches. I stare at the iron will of this vermin, this beauty. Black eyes brimming with someone else's tears, the creep of a thing that thinks it's still alive. And moving on, this is a prose poem called Bury Her Softly. The lady in the hospital bed opposite doesn't have visitors. She is a bird caught in a cat's mouth, her body a helpless offering, hair stranded damp against her skull. Her skin is the colour of milk poured into a blue plastic jug. When she sleeps, the inside of her mouth drops pink, a fledgling waiting for its next whilst her bones dwindle beneath sheets. Her home in my pocket, bury her softly. Quite a lot of the poems in my collection are ekphrastic poems, so they're poems that respond to works of art, paintings, sculptures, and it's a form of poetry that I really enjoy. And the next poem that I'm going to read is called Ophelia's Head is Finished. And it's inspired by a really famous pre-Raphaelite painting. I'm sure that you'll be able to picture it. It's the famous one painted by Millais of Ophelia drowning in the lake, inspired by Hamlet. And I was really fascinated when I was doing research for this poem because Elizabeth Siddal, the model and muse, suffered lie for weeks on end in this bath while this initial sketches were done for the painting. So this is called Ophelia's Head is Finished. A body lit by oil lamp cannot last. Another day of wintry bathwater contracts each breath, her blood tide shallower than it should be. She knows that he drew the riverbank first, studied dogwood, willow root, grass tilt, knows she's unready to be arranged in the lake. He has learnt the lines of her neck like prayer. Slack-jawed on her back, she studies distant stars on the ceiling, feels the clasp of her dress turning to rust on her spine, each seam nettling her skin. Her body is a book, stained satin folding and fretting chapters between her thighs. An agony of stillness. Her wrists are mottled stiff, holding her palm upwards. She can't imagine these half-wilted peonies once belonged to her. She longs to be resurrected, wants to fill an empty space with her own flowers, tries to stop shaking, her hands holding nothing but creaking, cutting air. And from one bath to the next, this is quite an old poem of mine. It's called Miscarriage. It must have been a boy, 10 days late. My heart turned to soft coral swaying in ferocious heat of bathwater. Waited pain of his quietness. Then this. Sail torn and unstitched, sinking slowly below my bloodied thighs, blackened bladder wrack floating across the surface. I dredged the fine threads as best as I could until I held a limp curl of seahorse in my hand. I turned off the bathroom light, lay so still on the seabed, hearing each uneasy muscle of pulse under shallows of my skin, pelvis picked white, ribbons of flesh floating to feed angelfish, bath gritty with salt and sand. One less pearl to count. Quite a few of the poems are about the body and its feelings and its changing. And this next poem is about one of my wisdom teeth. It's called Excision and Eidolon. I had signed consent, but woke up with my mouth made of Barbie doll, lower quarter turned plastic. It took over a decade to get some feeling back, pins and needles when I bit my lip. And still, a ghost floats through the walls of my lipstick. My baby daughter's cheek turned strange like horsehair. I fumble my fingertips over my mouth, sense the invisible boundary between human, polymer. The breaking of my jaw was the easy part, but I've learned to love the 3/4 kisses that linger between us, like the faint, pale crackle of rhubarb growing in the dark. There are quite a few love poems in the collection, some of them quite unusual. So as Jane mentioned, there is one where the speaker of the poem is Helen Sharman's spacesuit, and the narrator of this poem is a cat. This is called Dead Bird. I carried a dead bird for you in my mouth, waited for you to collect it from the kitchen floor. Say you like it, say you're going to keep it safe, say it is all you need, say it's all you ever wanted. I never saw you sweep bodies away, only the next morning and then the next, your hands were empty as a magic trick. Still, I hunted every night, clawed trees to paper for you, for us, brought you fresh mice, the last owl hoot, a new moon. I didn't know I'd been tamed, collared, held or hanging, my hunger splaying through starved branches like winter light over hard ground. Say a kind word, give me back one of my lives, feed me a wild lie. It's cold out here. I scratch your back door to damp cardboard. Ignore the black windows. Howl for you to return, to hold me like the sea. And this is my penultimate poem I'm going to read tonight. It's a very different kind of love poem. I was commissioned to write a poem for Valentine's Day by Poetry on Loan, which is a really fantastic organization which promotes poetry in libraries. And I really hate Valentine's Day. But luckily, a trip to my local co-op provided all the inspiration that I needed. This poem is called Paper Boats, and it's a sonnet. At the co-op, all the Valentine's cards have been squashed on their cardboard stand between the cans of cider and the bleach. A few yards from the till, bunnies hold roses, lovebirds gleam. Outside, the sky is full of winter sun, and I think about the unlikely trick of love while clouds bloom quietly, become one thing and then the next, bunching far above, then drooping over my head. I want to take each red envelope, fold it into a little boat, one each for anyone who has escaped a sad marriage or taken a second chance. Float each ship like a lopsided heart, so gently. Sail the yearning we all must carry. So I'd just like to say what a privilege it is to have been published by Nine Arches Press, and a huge thank you to Jane for all the love and attention that she has given each of my poems. And it is such a thrill, and it's never going to go away. And thank you to everyone who has shown up and who has shown support for the poems and the collection. And huge congratulations to Kostya as well. I cannot wait to hear your reading next. So my last poem is actually the last poem in the collection. And I think I knew pretty soon that it was going to be, from the start, that it was going to be the final poem. It's called No Peace Yet for My Animal Heart. I suppose the heaviest and the lightest things rest the same when they are buried. A hammock of earth must ease to sway the low-slung crumble of soil softly to a glitter of mineral brightness. Take, for example, the sarcophagus of a horse. Perhaps its eye, the size of a daffodil bulb, might be the first thing to give itself up, worms burrowing deep into its dark moon. I imagine its flesh becoming free, finding its own rhythm, sinew to seaweed, muscle to tundra, joint to spindle, a loosening until the flank turns as wild as the loamy mother who cradles it. I don't know much about the chemistry of decomposition, but I'm learning to carry the heaviest, the lightest things the same, waiting patiently each year, knowing what I have buried will come back bright to face me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga, for such a beautiful reading. Those poems are so wild and spellbinding and wonderful. So it's just a real treat to get to spend a little bit of this dark and stormy November evening with your work and with Frieze. Congratulations on its publication. We're delighted to have published Frieze and for it to be out in the world. I have posted a link into the chat, and thank you to everybody who's joining us and enjoying the poems this evening. If you loved Olga's poems, you'll also find readings from her on our YouTube page as well, and on Olga's page on our website. So to our final reader this evening, and to another debut collection that we're absolutely thrilled to have published. Our next reader is Kostya Tsolakis, and this is his debut collection, Greekling. Kostya was born and raised in Athens, Greece, and now lives in London. He's founding editor of Harana Poetry, the online magazine for poets writing in English as second or parallel language. And in 2019, he won the Oxford Brookes International Poetry Competition ESL category. His poems have been widely published in magazines, including 14 poems, 14 poems, Magma Poetry, Poetry London, The Poetry Review and Under the Radar, and anthologies such as 100 Queer Poems from Vintage in 2022. His debut poetry pamphlet, Ephibos, was published by Ignition Press in November 2020. And to tell you a little bit about Greekling and what drew me to this beautiful, powerful book, this debut begins with a boy's journey from an Athenian childhood with such clarity, evoking the city and all the history and physicality that its architecture holds. Between this is always tenderness, awareness, beauty, but also violence, danger. There is lament and reaching for joy. Kostya's poems have this irresistible power to place us right into the heart of things, between the body and mind, between emotion and action, the moment of history being made, like a photo developing, a family, a fleeting moment in time, and all the times of growing, of coming of age and coming out, through the 1980s and into the new millennium, all depicted and evoked with real skill, something that makes every one of Kostya's poems real, tactile, alive, sensual and utterly immediate. Leo Bois says of Greekling that it enacts the erotics of the queer body, a mesmerizing and compelling, moving from the personal, the historical, the mythical and the political, with a captivating flair and precision. Will you please welcome our final reader for this evening, Kostya Tsolakis.
No, how to follow this. As far as say good evening, everyone. Kalomina, which is what we say on the first of the month. Jane, thank you so much for this introduction. I mean, I was just about to say something and you completely left me speechless. It's a very beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it and I'm very, very touched by it. So yeah, I've got Greekling. It came out last week. It's my debut poetry collection, but I could say that I've been writing it for about 20 years in a sense. You know, one of the first poems in it goes all the way back to 2004, when I was doing my main writing at Warwick University. So it's a bit of a Midlands gathering today for all four of us, which I think is quite enjoyable. When I started writing Greekling, really, it was an attempt for me to reconcile my Greekness with my queerness, but also to evaluate my relationship with my parents. Because at some point in my puberty, I realized who I was, what I was attracted to, who I was attracted to, was not really what was expected of me, even from two parents who were very loving. So that was a very traumatic experience, I think, and I'm still processing it. So this book very much is an attempt to evaluate all these things, to interrogate them. But closer to the end of writing this collection, finishing this collection, I realized it was also about all these other rejected Greek bodies. And this is why I decided to call the book Greekling, because early on in the collection, you'll see that there's a definition for it. And according to one dictionary, it means a small, insignificant, or contemptible Greek. Now I mentioned bodies. You know, we've got bodies, physical bodies in the book of flesh and blood. We've got marble bodies, statues. I couldn't avoid that growing up in Greece, but also natural bodies. Greece is a country that is blessed. Its nature is beautiful, but unfortunately we're also very hard on our nature. We really mistreat much of it, and so I wanted to open the book with one such mistreated Greek body in nature. Iphissos. Sad river of Athens, no one loves you, no Tiber or Seine. No one sings Kifise, Kifise, Diomorphos, Buise. Upriver, an unspoiled pocket, lucid waters, plains in leaf see the sun. And Ephibos, his mother by his side, sacrificed his childhood locks, long like eels, sleeked with olive oil, to your divine current. Millennia later, barking dogs chained to your banks warn of what expects you downstream. Your sacred groves and sanctuaries replaced by factories, farmer labs, industrial parks. Refuse sullies your body, forms a lurid rainbow skin. Tossed rubble blocks your flow, culverts and concrete canals confine, reroute your natural course. Boxed under a jammed motorway, no good comes out of you. Fish you were home to, barbel, marathon, minnow, chub, gone. No monument marks your drab mouth. Cleaved by a crumbling jetty, you meet the baiting noise, a looping interchange, the anchor drops from millionaires' yachts. Chirping sparrows swoop down, peck your greasy face as if in thirsty farewell. In summer, you turn into a stagnant thing, dry up, stink. The city remembers you exist only when it pours, tenses as you swell, become a sweeping, turbid torrent, threatening to overflow, overwhelm. Athens wishes you did not exist. I've lived in England for 24 years. For a period of time, I didn't even go back to Greece. You know, there was a moment in time where I didn't go back for a couple of years. But, you know, as I mature, as I also understand my Greekness as well and my queerness, and I become comfortable in both as I grow older, I have also been witnessing how some people in Greece have been treating people, human beings, young people who don't fit the mold, Greeklings in their eyes, I would say. So I've had to witness this violence from a distance, because, you know, literal distance from England. One such case was the case of Vangelis Yakumakis, who was a young student in a dairy academy in the north of Greece, northwest of Greece. Who was missing for a long period of time until his body was found. And this is my response to that case, which really, how can I say it? It shook me. So here it is. The case of Vangelis Yakumakis. In this marshy ditch, overlooked by naked branches, lies the decomposing body of Vangelis. He studied at the Dairy Academy nearby. Missing for 37 days, he was sighted all over Greece at once. The press described him as sensitive, a loner. Bullies slapped him while he ate. When he showered, they turned the water off. Someone kicked him down a flight of stairs. Someone locked him in a closet, made him sing for hours. Then the video. 6 sniggering guys piling on top of him. Thousands heard Vangelis beg, "Please stop, you're hurting me." His voice, smaller than an olive. All this was recorded. So was the knife found at his side. What's lost are his features, the smooth flesh on his cheek, where his mother would kiss him goodbye. So I moved to England in 1999. And there were those summers when I would come back from university. So I came here to study. I studied in Warwick. I did my first degree at Warwick as well. So there was that was the period when I was starting to get to know myself as a gay man. But also I was starting to breathe after my, you know, for lack of a better word, claustrophobic teenage years. But there was this overlap when I didn't yet live in Greece, so I would have to go back, you know, I would go back home for the summer. But that felt also quite frustrating because I really wanted to be in England over those summers. So this poem touches upon that period in my life, and it's a ghazal or ghazal, which is a poem with a specific rhyming pattern, if you're familiar with it. It was quite fun, but also really challenging to do. Ghazal of them. Long summers home from uni, we still pretend I'm not one of them. Those men on the news at 8, they're all gay crews. Mum makes fun of them. She reads things, hears things, is told things. The ills it latches onto the body, mind. One standing, stare into nothing, agony spun of them. All I can think of in England, not checking myself, what I say, how I look, the handsome lads in the clubs, how I love every mother's son of them. Why did you buzz your hair? That shirt's too tight. Constant opinions. I miss the eager rays of eyes my body catches, the son of them. Home is trash palace, the joiners, ghetto, dance floors where boys unfurl, bloom. If I was king, I'd have portrait miniatures done of them. You won't ever let anyone harm you, Mum lets loose from behind the battlements of the morning papers, that loaded gun of them. In the close, sticky hold of the dark room, a name is null. In the close, sticky hold of the dark room, a name is null. Men go by touch, taste, smell. All the different selves I put on, I'm none of them. My childhood bed, host to just one body. I fall asleep counting kisses at parties and toilet stalls, other beds. Head spins, the sum of them. At the airport, Mum lets go of her Kostya. I, Kostya, hold fast, know who I stand among. Those men, my found kinfolk, glad to be one of them. As I read this, I realized I think I need reading glasses because I keep missing some lines. Yeah, so speaking of needing some reading glasses, the next poem is titled After the Year I Was Born. It's interesting for me because that is a year when a film I was obsessed with as a child came out, Clash of the Titans. Even for a Greek boy, I was very unusual in my obsession with mythology. And so, yeah, when I found out that one of my favorite films with that have a myth in the story came out the year I was born, I was delighted. But 1981 is also a terrible year in many ways because it's when the first cases of what came to be known as HIV/AIDS became known. So I'm very aware of that, of the fact that this epidemic that has been that I grew up in the shadow of became more known the year I was born. But this is also a poem that looks into the queer history of Athens, and there were lots of near where my flat in Athens is now. There were quite a lot of cinemas which used to be mainstream cinemas, but the neighborhood became seedier as the years went by, and many of these cinemas ended up becoming porn cinemas, and that's where many gay men used to go to cruise. So it's a small poem, but it's one of my favorites. I really like reading this one. 1981. Men sit in smoke-filled cinemas, screen-lit eyes fixed on Harry Hamlin's Perseus, his tight, muscled, fat physique, dimpled chin, conditioned chestnut mane. Fired up, they seek a taste of this demigod, his life-giving nectar, in those other cinemas that constellate the city's seedy roundabout. Fellow mortal men is what they get. The broadsheets they carry for some semblance of propriety cushion their knees, protect neatly ironed trousers from the grimy carpet, sticky velour seats. Buried in the columns, the first recorded cases. So I'm entering, whether I like it or not, I'm entering middle age now. And quite a lot of my thinking deals with my youth, those very first years when I came to England when I was 2021, 22, going out. Even though I was in Warwick, that's where I went to study. You know, one summer I did an internship in London. Oh my God. So I was out every night. I pretty much run out of money within, you know, my month's allowance. I ran out within a week. I'm ashamed to say, so I had to call home and say, Dad. Yeah, I think back to that July, it was beautiful. I just went out, you know, I made out with boys, you know, I went clubbing, I got home at 6 o'clock in the morning, went to my job at 8. I don't know how I did it. But it bothers me that memory kind of fades details, and there's a lot of Cavafy in this collection. I'm not going to read any of the poems that sort of respond to Cavafy, but you know, Cavafy deals a lot with memory and the body remembering a few things, but the mind forgetting some details. So obviously my poetry is very much indebted to the work of Cavafy, and this is one poem that sort of touches upon memory and how we forget a few things, but you know, the senses sometimes don't forget. So it's wonderful how that happens. So this is a poem that will take us back about 21 years. Nocturne for the American boy appalled at pop stars. What was your name? I pick through layer on igneous layer of all my hookups, crushes, loves, find no trace of it. Time leaves behind only the hardiest material. Your nipple piercings, my gold baptismal medallion. Other details of our night together just about retain their shape. Holding hands on the top deck of the night bus, transporting us to my dinky room in Bayswater. Your slender body, even paler than mine. Your hair black, straight, obscuring your forehead. But your face, beyond recollection. What's intact is the thrill I felt watching as you stripped for me, your naked silhouette caught in the blind silver lines, the false dawn of the fire escape lights. I'm going to read just one more poem. I think I know where it is. Firstly, I want to say thank you, Jane, Nine Arches Press, for offering my book a beautiful Midlands home. It's also been lovely to read alongside Roma. We are, well, I don't know how to describe us. We're friends, of course, but I don't know. There's another word that goes beyond friends, I think, because we worked together on Harana, of course. We got to know each other after we were in the primers shortlist. So yeah, I love you very much, Roma. You know that. And also, Olga, I've been I've been following your work since you were also shortlisted for primers. So you know, we have that bond. You know, that goes back to 2017. So it's been really wonderful to read alongside you all. I really look forward to reading with Olga in real life in Coventry, return to Coventry. And the final poem I want to read is one that is about my dad, really. I lost my dad not even a month ago. So tomorrow will be a month since we lost my dad. And I've been left with this wonderful inheritance. My father was, you know, he was old. He was 92 when he died last month. You know, born in 1930, a completely different time, you know, different mores. You know, he was in his 20s and the 50s. You'd think he'd be conservative, you know. He was in the Air Force. You know, I come from an Air Force background from my dad's side. But when I came out to my dad, and I knew it wasn't exactly what he wanted, the great thing about my dad is that he never put himself first, or his emotions, or what he wanted. I was his priority. My mental well-being was of utmost importance for him. And I'm glad we communicated. I'm glad we talked to each other. I'm glad we kind of found, you know, maybe not a common ground, but you know, an understanding. I felt nothing but love for my dad. I wasn't disappointment to him. I know that he said that to me as well, that a son worthy of his father, he told me when he was a few months before he died. And I'm grateful that when I came out, he was the most tender and beautiful soul that I can even describe. So this is for my dad. Sparrow. The day before the royal wedding, rainbow flags jostle for air with Union Jack bunting. Neon flyers, pumped lads in Aussie bum briefs, hawked weekend-long parties at the clubs. Pacing Old Compton Street, I rang my dad. I could have sent Yaya to tell them, at breakfast, perhaps. Pink dressing gown over her nightie, carried up 2 floors by her fluffy slippers, the angel with a message. If it came out of her mouth like a velvet ribbon, surely they couldn't turn their faces from it. Mum looking at her scrambled eggs as if they were vomit. On the other end of the line, Dad said, "It's all right," in the careful voice he used when talking to sparrows. Those curious little things, so easy to frighten, that perched, hollow-boned on the railing as he tended his delicate balcony plants. Thank you so much. And just a quick shout out to Aaron Moth, who is a queer collage meister based in Berlin. I forgot to say it earlier, but I'm so grateful for him for making this beautiful cover that I'm in love with. And so, yes, thank you so much for listening very much.
Thank you, Kostya, for that beautiful reading, for those poems that are lucid and dazzling, full of longing and celebration and commemoration. It was just such a joy to hear you read, and to have that sort of connection between all 3 poets as well. Thank you for reminding me that primers is a common thread, as well as the Midlands, that the primers has also, the scheme has also been a common thread for all 3 writers that have read this evening. It's been a total pleasure to listen to you all. I'm just going to bring all of our poets back onto the screen together for one last time before we finish our event this evening. Thank you to our wonderful audience. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us. It's been great to read all of your comments and all of your chats, as well as the event has been going on. And I'm sure you'll join me in now saying to Kostya and to Olga with their debut collections, it's such an important moment when you have these wonderful first collections out. It's a really great thing. And I thought as well to say, you know, here's to all the poems that will come as well after this. It's been lovely to hear Roma reading from her second collection as well. So what a delight. Congratulations on both Greekling and Frieze. We're so pleased to welcome them into the fold here at Nine Arches and release them out into the world for our lovely audiences to enjoy. Thank you to everybody who's joined us online and has been there on YouTube chatting away and joining us and cheering on. And finally, thank you, Kostya Tsolakis, Olga Dermott-Bond, Romalyn Ante, for your beautiful readings. We're now going to give a little Zoom read, and then we Zoom wave, I should say. I'm getting my words mixed up now. A little Zoom wave to you all to say good night. That's the end of tonight's reading, but we're so grateful to everybody for joining us. Thank you ever so much, and we'll see you again soon for the next Nine Arches online reading, which will now be in 2024. So we'll see you in the new year with more new things to come. But for now, good night, and thank you, everybody.